Joining me now here at CNBC Africa headquarters in Sandton, Johannesburg is CNBC Africa's Chief Editor, Godfrey Mutizwa, who will lead us through the next discussion. Hello, Godfrey.
Thank you, Zinati. It's good to be here. I always like to remind people that Africa's first big export were human beings to the Asian continent. So we are talking about power. Now, how big is the size of the power opportunity that we are talking about today? Well, as big as 90% of the energy requirements of South Africa, if we take the view that tomorrow's energy will largely be clean. We can extrapolate further and extend that opportunity to the rest of the continent where fossils also hold sway. And we haven't even begun talking about the more than 600 million Africans without access to power. So it's not about the size of the opportunity. The question should be, how do we accelerate the provision of power and electricity on the African continent? The topic for my panel discussion is opportunities in power, fossil fuels versus renewables. Let's look at a short background package before we meet the panelists.
The International Energy Outlook 2020 identified major trends in Asia and Africa. As energy use grows in Asia, some cases indicate more than 50% of electricity could be generated from renewables by 2050. The cost of natural gas and renewable energy could shift the fuel mix for generating electricity in the region either further towards fossil fuels or towards renewables. Africa could meet its electricity growth needs in different ways depending on whether development comes as an expansion of the central grid or as off-grid systems. The African continent has some of the most abundant renewable energy resources in the world, and the potential to transform outcomes for millions of people through the accelerated deployment of a renewables-based energy system. Renewables will increase energy security, create green jobs, advance energy access, including clean cooking, and help build resilient African economies. India was the third largest energy consumer in the world after China and the United States in 2018. And its need for energy supply continues to climb as a result of the country's dynamic economic growth, population growth, and modernization over the past several years. India's call for increased investment underscores the need for private, domestic, and international funding, as public funding alone is not enough to meet India's climate goals. Anil Sardana, Managing Director and CEO, Adani Transmission and Distribution, and Managing Director, Adani Power. B.R. Jaju, Executive Director and CFO, DB Power Limited. Sabine Dal-Omo, CEO of Siemens South Africa, and Brian Damas, Chief Executive, African Rainbow Energy and Power. The moderator is Godfrey Mutizwa, Chief Editor, CNBC Africa.
Thank you, Jill, for promoting me. Thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon and being participants in this discussion on the power opportunity that we see on the African continent. I wanted to begin, first of all, by laying, if you like, just the size of the opportunity that we're talking about here, hearing the thoughts of the participants that we have today. If I can begin with you, Brian, I begin with you because you sat at the helm of Eskom. And if you listen to my intro, I suggested that maybe in the future, Eskom or perhaps fossils will not be the big contributor to South Africa's power requirements as of today. Am I wrong, Brian?
Good afternoon, Godfrey, and good afternoon to my colleagues. Just to note, I don't think Eskom is the fossil. What Eskom uses is fossil fuels. So let's just make that clear. You're very right in that the world is changing. And I think there's a few key issues around this energy transition that we're all navigating, both us in South Africa, the broader African continent, as well as our colleagues in India. And first and foremost is that this energy transition to a more affordable, sustainable, cleaner energy and more flexible is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's not something that we're going to prevent. It's going to happen. And the question is just the path that we will follow to eventually get there. And that will be true for South Africa as well. It is our view that given this extensive system that actually Eskom has built over decades, It allows South Africa to make that transition a lot faster. But it does require South Africa and the continent to invest in interconnection. So the grids, the enables, and the technology that will enable these new technologies to play a role. So you're very right. This continent, we must understand, has got millions of people that don't have access to energy. We need to address that. And using these new technologies can allow Africa to leapfrog getting to those people, because the continent is physically just too big to allow old traditional models to provide energy access. We can do that now quicker, we can do that cleaner, and I think we can do that cheaper with the use of new technology. So that is my view, that you have a continent with an abundance of energy resources. It is energy resource independent. What we require is the implementation of that and the use of technology.
Thank you, Brian. I want an intervention from abroad. BR, can I come to you? Your thoughts in terms of potentially what we could do here to try to solve the huge opportunity that we have before us. BR? Doesn't sound like BR can hear us.
I was on
there
mute.
we go. There we go. There we go. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think you have set the tone. I will like to touch base, first of all, the potentials and upcoming opportunities in my country, India. For the power, one always looks for clean power, affordable power, reliable power, and sustainable power. These are the four objectives. In the backdrop of India as a nation, fifth largest economy in nominal terms, and third largest GDP. Hello?
Please go ahead.
Okay. And the country has grown from 2011 to 20 on a CAGR basis 7.2%. But unfortunately, energy growth and demand has grown close to 4.6, 4.7% on CAGR for the same period. So this opens up the opportunity in terms of, even we look at like per capita consumption for the country is barely 1150 kilowatts as compared to, even we talk of advanced nations, US 12,600 about, Australia 9,000, even UK 5,000, and China even 4,500. Even we are just 50% of the world average, which is 3,150 about. So with this, despite that we are fifth largest installed base, and today, as of February end 2021, the country has installed base of about 370 gigawatt of electricity. On the fuel side, it is thermal, which is coal and diesel, 231, which is close to 62% installed base of the thermal. 12% is hydro, that's 46 gigawatt. Renewables have surged to now 24% at 87 roughly gigawatt, and nuclear is still around 2%. Now, sector-wise in India, the private sector has really accelerated over the last 10 years with CAGR of 20% growth. So it accounts for 47% of the total installed base, rest within states and central remaining 53%. The interesting story for country is, if just as a point of view how this has progressed into 1950, which was base of only 2 gigawatt, and today it is 370, and phenomenal growth has happened over last 15 years. And tremendous capacity got added, particularly 2015 onward, close to 132,000. Now, having said that, this gives only just statistical figures and feel that there is a big gap between what you see and what country is expected to achieve in terms of GDP and growth. And energy being backbone, it has to be accelerated. The question is now, which type of energy will accelerate what are the opportunities, what are the government initiatives which are already embarked upon. But before that, let me deal with very briefly some pain areas and how the power sector in last 10 years have gone through some kind of turbulence, pains, and its own shortcomings. The reforms have started way back in 2003 with the Electricity Act, but rightly or maybe wrongly, it started at generation level and left much behind at distribution.
Right.
And that is why first pain area is my discoms level, which are the power distributor companies, mainly state-owned government, state government-owned discoms. Now, the first problem today, what we see is the balance sheet is very weak, exceptionally weak. The discoms credit profile due to weak operating efficiencies.
Yeah.
There is a big gap of that what the tariff they collect charge to customers and the cost of supply. There is a big gap, rising gap, and built a large regulatory asset position. Now, as a result of this, they have been delaying constantly the payments due to generating companies. So in the process, generating companies have become partially sick because the payments are not coming on time. Besides discom, as I mentioned, that there is a gap of close to 65 to 70 paise on every unit they produce and sell to customer because of gap between average price realization and average cost of what they procure.
Yeah.
Third is that incidentally things have slightly improved, but that losses, ATC losses, what you call, on all India average are still exceeding 20 to 22%, which is significantly higher as compared to if you benchmark with world standard, which should not be more than 12 to 13%. So a lot of power is getting lost in the transmission and distribution level, and it goes unbilled.
Yeah.
Other thing is,
I have to intervene, unfortunately. I've realized I've got about 20 minutes, and I really wanted us to make sure that we pick up those lessons and we get the others to contribute as well.
I will touch base with major issues of discom, then coal-related, the coal availabilities. At generation level, the issues of the cost overruns, aggressive bidding on the competitive biddings. I will no more long-term power purchase agreements are there, and some of the regulatory issues. Let me straightway come to the government initiatives which have come with regard to making coal available under now liberal auction schemes. Under that now there's one concept called Sakti scheme, and there are now regulatory directions for clearing like change in law payments and other sticky payments. Atmanirbhar recent scheme releasing the liquidity. Now huge liquidity is released to discoms to make health of discoms far better.
Yeah.
Now, I will not get into too many things which can be, a lot of material is available on power sector India, but connecting to the emerging opportunities with respect to renewable power, now the complete focus of the government is to get into renewable power focus.
Yeah.
We have a target, of course, that looks little unachievable, but by 2022, 175 gigawatt going to be renewable energy, comprising of solar predominantly 100 gigawatt and wind about 60, rest others.
Yeah.
Now, and we have a target of 525 gigawatt by 2030 on renewable side. Now, question is, it will require a huge investment, close to 500 to 700 billion US dollars, which will also take a grid integration and expansion. Now, one has to have a lot of joint ventures arrangements to invite overseas investors, also which will be a process of equity, technology, equipment supply, and other consulting and collaborative arrangements. So this will open up a huge opportunity to investors and entities looking forward to join India to make this whole program happen.
No question about it. There are many lessons there to be learned from India without a shred of doubt, and there will be many partnerships that will be required. Plus, we also have to be very innovative in terms of how we structure the financing that will be required to get those programs going. I wish in Africa we had the problems as that you have BR around having a lot of power that you can't get out to the people. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Let me quickly get in the thoughts of Anil. Anil, I want your assessment of the opportunity and the ways in which you see this collaboration going.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me over. Well, the opportunities are immense, and especially considering the fact that there is a large area in Africa which is still not electrified. One has to therefore look at all the learnings that we have had in terms of decentralized power. That would work very well in the African situation. I am associated with some of the African investment platforms, and I find that they're all working towards making sure that the consumers in Africa should be able to get electricity at a competitive price. And therefore, solutions which are more benign, like you talked about solar, you talked about biomass, you talked about the fact that how consumers could be benefited by the resources that's available locally. So you have a good amount of hydros. There are locations where you even have now gas supplies available. So to me, I guess all those learnings of India can easily move around and benefit the customers in Africa. And eventually, as I see, we are all blessed to be living in technology times, and therefore transfer of all that input and making sure that the technology aspects get transferred from India to the African utilities as well as customer is what one would dream, and one would hope the mutual benefit will be facilitated between the two countries.
Thank you very much, Anil. Sabine, let me come to you. And I think one of the points that I picked off BR's contribution now was the fact that you have a lot of power that's been generated, but you've got issues in terms of delivering it. Of course, where you are at Siemens, this is part of the business that you guys do. I want your thoughts in terms of where we begin. Do we begin, first of all, by getting the generation done and dusted before we talk about the distribution? And also, if you could quickly give us a thought in terms of the financing models that we require to ensure we're able to bring that technology that India has and the ways they've developed onto the African continent.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. And yeah, well, I mean, look, you will need to run it from both sides. I mean, if we look at the South African scenario, and Brian already alluded to it, as well as BJ on the Indian scenario, well, we do need to have more electricity because currently there is a shortage of supply thereof, and therefore we do need to work on generation. But as outlined already before, we have an issue which is called climate change, yeah, and I think in COVID-19 over the last 12 months, we have seen that economies can do with less power, and there can be more efficient, specifically when we talk about green electricity. And looking at Africa, but also at India, where the major cities are located, we know that if the ocean levels are rising, we have many of our major cities under threat. So hence, tackling climate change is one important part, and obviously emissions from coal-fired power stations are one of the major culprits in that scenario. So hence, we have two areas. One is the type of electricity we are generating coming from renewable, which should be wished for, but also the change in additional capacity, which needs to have to come to the grid in order to connect regions which are currently not connected. But obviously, that doesn't come at no cost. And one part, I will allude to that just now on the funding mechanism. But I think what is more important, and BJ as well as Brian alluded to it, is with regards to the grid. And we have very little investment seen in grid technology because, as you are aware, renewable energies are not as reliable as fossil traditional power stations, which run basically 24/7. So depending on if your renewable source, wind or solar, is available, you have fluctuations in your grid and you have different demands. And hence, you would wish that there is a stronger investment into the grid to make sure that the grid is communicating, first of all, with the demand from the consumer, but also with the electricity being available. And that can be all intelligently managed through digital applications, specifically in the grid management, and we call that the grid edge, by which you obviously have consumers and resources communicating with each other. And looking at that, why is it so important? Because you will have more and more companies which are specifically multinationals which have signed up to the RE100, where the most influential companies have committed by 2030 zero carbon emission. And obviously, if you want to do business with these companies in India or in Africa, and particularly in South Africa, then you need to make sure that they have the ability to produce their own electricity or source electricity, which is then generated from renewable sources. And that brings me then as well to the funding mechanism. So clearly, infrastructure is a costly expense. So the states often have not the money, specifically in the African context, to fund all this by their own. So you will have some kind of public-private partnerships. And specifically in South Africa, we have a very successful program which we have run under the Renewable Energy IPP program, which the round 5 was just launched last week by the ministry. And there we have seen over the previous 4 rounds that if you have a government which gives you surety on policies and also incentivizes the uses of renewable resources, you are able to make sure that banks and funding agencies or private investment funders have an interest to put their money on these kind of renewable sources or energy sources, because you will know that you will get your money back. And I think the renewable program is a great achievement of an African continent. So far, we have only seen that really taking off in South Africa, but another mechanism can be in a public-private partnership where private companies, like for instance, mining industry or food and beverage or high energy consumer of any other nature, become one of the off-takers as an exclusive commitment. And therefore, that will also be sufficient in order to generate funding from banks and funding institutions.
Yeah, when you spoke of climate change, I was thinking of the background that we saw to BR and that beautiful ocean behind him. And I was thinking, imagine all that destroyed. We certainly don't want that to happen. Brian, let me come to you. I've got a complex question for you. I am changing the topic slightly. So I am saying, is the topic asking us to say fossil versus renewables, or fossil or renewables, or fossils and renewables?
Yeah, it is complex with all of your O's that you add in, Godfrey, but it is both. The energy transition is one that will happen certainly, but not abruptly. An evolution, and we see massive additions of renewable energy, like our colleagues in India has indicated, and that will continue. That will continue unabated. But as all of our countries change, so India has got more than 300 gigawatts of capacity, of which 200 gigawatts of that is still fossil-based. And so for India and South Africa, as an example, that has got about 40 gigawatts of fossil fuels, that needs to transition over time. So the view for us is very clear. That transition will be renewables, and you would need both. They currently serve different purposes. As Sabine has indicated, renewables are reliable, but they're reliable for the time that they are available. Solar PV, around 24% of the time. If you're lucky in wind, anything above 40% of the time. And, you know, the wind sometimes blows at night that you don't need the power where the demand is lower. So the question is, how do you integrate all of these? And as technology evolves, and as the introduction of things such as storage and battery technologies reduces its cost, renewables will have a greater penetration. So our view, our company's view of why we've created this company is because Africa's got this huge potential, has got this massive need, and we're going to invest purely in renewables. Why? Because coal and fossil, coal in particular, has peaked globally already in 2014 and will continue to see a decline in coal usage globally. Secondly, the rest of fossils, oil and gas, is not yet peaked, and gas would play a hugely important enabling role for that transition, and that transition to increase renewables. Yeah. And within a South African context and within an African context, the penetration of renewables will that be a lot faster.
Yeah.
And eventually, towards 2030, renewables comprising a greater installed base than coal within the South African continent.
Yeah. Anil and BR, I want you to help me answer my next question, because I am focusing a little bit on renewables. And the question always when you talk renewables is you're still asking the question, affordable. Are you at that stage where renewables have become affordable and therefore that question is now redundant? And also, how have you solved the issue of making sure that the power is affordable? Because that's a very sensitive issue, I can assure you, on the African continent, whichever country you walk into. Can I begin with you, Anil, and then I'll come to BR. If you can be as brief as you can be. We have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah. So first, I'll answer your second question first. The renewables is very affordable now. It's just $3 cents to a kilowatt hour. So it's naturally come down to a very competitive level. To your first point that you asked, Brian, in terms of renewable and conventional, I would say what we have practiced very well in India is renewable with conventional acting as a filler. So to the extent that the sun shines and the wind blows in the evening, whenever you don't have, you use your conventional coal assets prudently to make sure that you get round-the-clock power until the battery storage becomes competitive, which I guess is still 5 to 7 years, 10 years away. So competitiveness is the hallmark, and I guess India and Africa are alike. We have to deliver competitive solutions to customer, and it has got to be a delivered power supply with a target of anything like 5 to 6 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah, adding to this, just going by the Indian experience to promote solar power or renewable power, even many of these regulatory authorities have put obligation on distribution companies or captive power consumers, big consumers, to buy certain percentage of renewable power along with other fuel. Like thermal, along with that, they have to buy certain percentage of renewable power. In fact, it is now gaining a momentum, what is called a bundling of thermal power with renewable energy. So this will open up a tremendous avenues and potential for promoting renewable power. As regards to affordability, Mr. Anilji has already briefed that it has become now absolutely competitive with any other power which was available, as position 5 years back was totally different. I would like to add one thing is two other Indian experiences which can travel to even continent like Africa, is that a lot of JVs which have been proved very successful in India to pursue other markets, including South Africa, Southern America, and some part of even Middle East. And this has helped to gain that lot of newer technology, newer investment, and new form of bonds which companies have accessed a lot of money and invested in renewable things, including some big corporates. Anil Bhai will be able to further deal on that. Yeah. Other is that corporate power structure also is modified in such a manner to promote renewable energy to meet ESG objective. ESG, I mean environmental, social, and governance objective. And third and last important point is success for this whole thing is battery storage. And India has already, I think, planned 34 gigawatt, and company like AES from US and Mitsubishi from Japan has already committed. This will really bring a lot of attractiveness for investors to come in and join for renewable power projects missions.
Absolutely.
So I will just leave that.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much indeed. Sabir, you've got the final word.
Well, I mean, look, I would concur with it will be a phased approach. I mean, look, specifically in both of the countries and in South Africa, at least coal generates about 100,000 jobs in the mining environment and in the power station. So hence, in a country where jobs are scarce, we will need to find a way to have this phased out over a period of time. The future is clearly green because our philosophy is that, energy transition and a grid edge can create a green economy. And we have seen that that is possible specifically now during COVID-19. And we're optimistic that as a combined initiative between business and government, we are able to manage the CO2 emissions and hence stick to our commitment of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Absolutely. I keep hearing the word government. I keep hearing the word of around ensuring that the money is available, and also the regulatory environment itself needs to be absolutely correct. There was a question I wanted to ask Brian. I'm going to save him that question because it's a tricky question. It was going to be around whether Eskom is going to remain with us in the future. I saw a paper written by somebody some time back where they were suggesting that technology was going to take over Eskom unless Eskom transitioned to renewables. And that's been a slow process. But for today, thank you very much to all our participants for your insights and your thoughts. I think clearly the future is green. Yes, it's getting cheaper, but when will it get to us? Well, maybe in time. Because if I think about how to make my own power green, I was given a quotation that I cannot repeat here. Thank you to all our participants. Zinati, I hope you picked up something.
Indeed, the future is green, but as Brian said, he actually schooled you saying that Eskom is not the fossil. It just uses fossil fuels. And of course, that is as the energy transition will happen, but it will not be abrupt. So it's not fossil fuels or renewable energy at the moment. It's fossil fuels and renewable energy. Thank you to Godfrey and to all our panelists.